In this one, we're going to be actually doing our start on the animations. So we're going to be setting up our base pose that for both the weapon and the character, that's going to be just kind of at the just kind of at a gripping point that we can start manipulating and doing our animations with, that we can use as a fallback in case we screw something up. So let's go ahead and I guess just begin. So we can select the armature of the weapon. And I'm going to begin to move this to the right hand, and this is where I'm going to start it. I'll go to Armature 2. I'm going to rename that to just, we don't want it to be called Armature. You know what, screw it. Naming works. What is it inside of UE? Whatever. Alright, so again, we want to make sure we're in object mode with our skeleton selected. If we were to begin and start in pose mode and then move it, we would have issues when we go to actually make our animations later. So as you can see, this little dot here, that's our origin point of the weapon. So when we go to make our animations, our origin point would be off. So once the animation fires, the weapon would move away from the origin point to perform the animation. Once it's over, it would snap back to the origin point. So it would snap away and to our player's hands, which we do not want. A way to get around that is doing what I'm doing and selecting the armature inside of object mode and positioning it that way and doing an object constraint instead of a bone constraint. And my ears just started ringing. All right, so let's continue our positioning. Just get it somewhat decent in the hand. I'm going to go over here, select move and rotate, make it a little easier. Let's set it to local. Again, we're not getting it perfect, just a rough idea. Oops, maybe up. I think that's going to be about, come on, I hate the whole movement. There we go. I think that's going to be about where we want. Gonna give it a little bit of a rotation this way. And I'm just gonna leave it there. So now we're gonna add our object constraint. Make sure you're not doing bone constraint. You want an object constraint. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna take it, do a child of the target. We're gonna click the eyedropper and select our armature, which is the little black sticks. Now remember, these end in .ao. The mesh ends in .mo. So we want to make sure we have .ao, which is indicating our armature. Click that. We're going to search for the bone name of hand_r. And we're going to do the IK hand_r and press set inverse. And this will make it so when we click our hand, which is this right here, the weapon's going to move with the hand. So we have that set up. Let's go ahead and start. Just get a general positioning. So I feel like it'll probably be a little easier to and just somewhere kind of about here. And we can start, actually I want to try to get that about as straight as I can. So let's see, I want to set the wrist and just have the wrist be pretty straight. Slight bend to the right, which I want. I have my pistol here, so I'm trying to go back and forth and like visualize. So my hand cancel a tad bit this way. Just a smidge more. So I think about like that. So I want to go back in object mode and start rotating and positioning our weapon. Try to get it about as straight as I can. Out of curiosity. Yeah, never mind. I was hoping that would possibly recenter it. Unless I can do... Yeah, that doesn't change it. Never mind. So try to get it close as we can to straight. Yeah, starting along that line. So we need to go a smidge like that. A little more. To where it almost connects with the next line. That actually does connect. So let's swing over it a bit. That's pretty close. Being straight that way. Let's try the same thing vertically. So I can just probably align the tips of the sights. So 1, 2, 3, 4 and 3/4. 1, 2, say 1, 2, 3. Yeah, it's still the same. So 3 and 3/4. 1, 2, 3. Oh, that was 4. Yeah. So that's about 4.5. Smidge over 4.5. Doesn't have to be perfect, so that's good there. And our vertical. Let's see what would be a good way for this. You can actually go by just the sights and get them lined up. That might be a little bit easier. So we have the side here. That actually looks pretty good. I want to leave that. So I'm just going to rotate you and try to get you about as centered as I can. So R, then Z. Get those. It's about as perfect as I can get. So that should be pointing pretty much straight forwards. Go ahead and save it. I think I'm going to leave the hand where it is. All right, I like it. So I'm going to go ahead and go into pose mode. Select all the bones by pressing A. Go to this little running guy here for the object data properties. Select pose library, new. Call this one 1911 pose lib. I'm just going to add and call it default. This will just be the default pose, I guess. And now we can start working on the hands. So we click the armature and object mode for the character, go to pose mode, and as you can see, there are currently no fingers. We just have our hands and a couple of bones on the forearm. Well, not bones, but controllers on the forearm. So if we come over here, again, in object data properties, we see layers. And if we click through the layers, you can see we have a couple different things that appear. So for example, here's our fingers. Well, if we want both of these to be shown along with the hand, you can just do shift and select how you want. So for now, I'm just going to select just the fingers to keep everything else out of the way. So let's begin. Go ahead. I prefer doing, whoops, all the rotations in local when doing fingers. Bend it in just a smidge. Get the fingertip. All right. I'm going to select this, move it out just a bit so it's not partially into the trigger. and I want to rotate it up. So we have a little bit straighter of a position. Yeah. About like that. Do the next finger. Go underneath by pressing Control and then 7. Get a little bit of a better view. I need to select move you in. Up just a tad. That's not bad. I want to get the finger just a smidge higher up to where it's just underneath the trigger guard. All right, let's do the next finger. Whoops. Make it just a tad longer to match the rest. And let's do the pinky. I want to actually drop you just a hair. Probably the only thing I don't like about this rig is how bad. I noticed the fingers and stuff stretching quite a bit when you actually do rotations. Even though I'm intentionally stretching them now. Just try to get a good look for it. All right, I think that looks pretty good. I'll go ahead and do a save. And now we can begin to bring the other hand over. So I want to check the other layer and begin to drag this hand. That is not going to reach, so let's bring the other hand inward and begin figuring out how we want it. All right, we also have the issue with the elbows right now. So I want to counteract that by actually bringing the weapon up higher to where it's actually in frame. Change this back to global. About like so of the camera. And then I'm going to take these controllers and bend them downward. So we have a much more natural pose going right now. And now we can continue with setting up this hand. So as I'm holding mine, I noticed my left hand is actually a lot more farther forwards than I initially would have thought for posing. So to give a rough idea, about a 1/4 inch past my wrist where my palm, just a little past where my palm starts. That is at about where the back strap is of the pistol. And that leaves my knuckles, like my first initial knuckles, starting where the knuckles on my right hand are. So let's use that as a baseline, which is actually about there. Tilted a fair bit farther forwards, or down, I mean. And this angle. Fair bit under. And on top. Just a smidge off, actually about where it's at now. And now we can start trying to pose. If we go into wireframe, we can see the hand and roughly where it correlates to the fingers and the palm on the grip. So thinking about there in wireframe, it is against the fingers. It's against the, not quite against the grip. I'm going to go to global and just drag it in a smidge till it makes contact, and go back to local. Now let's start adjusting the fingers. I'm going to start with the thumb. I'm going to rotate you, start to bend you down. And lay you just against the frame to where you're not actually hitting the magazine release, to where you wouldn't accidentally lock it. And I feel like the thumbs on these are actually extremely long, so we can actually shorten them. So if we click on the main bone, drag it in, you can see it shortens it. Same thing. Do it on the next knuckle or the next joint, just a tad bit. And then the final one. Try to get a pretty realistic thumb length going. And have it lay against the frame. About like so. We can do the same thing, shorten our other thumb. Actually looks a bit short. Here. And lay it on top of our hand. So when I rotate you, so when I rotate the actual, that's starting to look a bit better. I'm just going to move them up, get a better view in the camera. And I'm starting to like this quite a bit so far. So we have thumbs kind of laid out how we want. Let's continue wrapping our fingers around. So again, my first actual finger is up pretty much against the trigger guard. And it lays right on top of my first knuckle. Again, it's probably easier to go underneath. Rotate these out of the way. Oop, wrong one. We can actually try to, I think might need to angle the hand in just a tad more, or that might be because of the angle. Let's see. Yeah. Let's rotate this way a smidge and push in a tad. Shouldn't change it all that much, but we gotta readjust the thumb. Let's see, it's this one. And have it about there. And that it still looks pretty nice. This should allow us to get the wrapping fingers a good bit farther in place. And just lengthen them a tad. All right, it's pretty good. Let's continue with the remaining fingers. Oops, is it you? That's pinky. There's ring finger. Oh, you're way far down. Then do the pinky. Let's do some readjustments. And that's looking pretty nice. I want to just gently pivot the index finger up. And I like that. I think that's what we're going to be using as our pose. So now what we can do is we can go back and view our initial layer. I'm just going to select both hand bones, go into our camera view, and just get a rough placement. So I really like where Modern Warfare is. So I'm going to go try to find that. See if we can just find an image. Well, there's not much unless I just scrolled past one. Just a quick look down. All right, I'm going to grab, that'll be a close enough view. So it's fairly close. It's not offset a whole lot. Go back into global. and we know we want it away from the center of our screen. So I'm thinking about there, just rotate it. I'll leave the rotation for now. And I think right there is going to be pretty good for our initial pose. So I'm going to go to our pose library, make sure I have the fingers and the hand selected. I think it matters. Press A to select all the bones for the character. New pose library, call this one pistol pose lib. Create a new one, call it idle or rest for our resting pose. Then we Control S to save. Right, so that probably took a little bit, but I'm pretty happy where it's at, just for kind of for how the hands are on the weapon. And now I think we're at a very good starting point to actually start working on things like our idle animations and that sort of thing. So I will see you in the next one.